All right, so welcome to lesson 44, radio 223, part-timers. Um, so, so I'm saying, so let's just get on with the lesson. As you know, I just want to get straight into it, covering how we can chat to people, how to get the best out of an interviewee, and how to run the best interview while you are on air. Okay, so let's go to the slides and let's go to the first slide. As always, I will elaborate once I do certain points and cover some points. So let's look at the first slide. So every station should have an interview policy or guide in place. It's a purpose to guide presenters in the process of conducting good interviews by instructing them to follow certain helpful techniques. And, here's an example of a policy, right? So an interview should be considered a feature and should have all the characteristics of a feature, a beginning, middle, and an end, as well as a common thread throughout. All interviews must be target market related and must be passed by program departments. So again, this is just an example of what one station might allow. I'll explain now in just a second. Most radio stations would have a policy that all interviews need to be approved by the program department. For example, like on commercial radio, even sometimes to a large extent to community radio. And why is this? Because we don't want to give free publicity to something that could actually be translated or transferred into a sales opportunity, right? So we don't want to just, so you're going to get, so as a producer slash as a presenter, you're going to be inundated with a number of emails consistently, let's say with music, let's say music labels, right? Labels will constantly want to promote their musicians, always, so obviously to up the sales, whether it is digital sales or actual physical sales, whatever it may be. If they are still CDs that are being released, I don't know, that's not really a thing anymore, but you understand, when to push them themselves, you can't, let's say, put that artist on just for the sake of promoting their new release, the new album release, right? You have to find a different reason to speak to them, and you'll also, as a good producer, will dictate to the guest, or let's say in this case the musician, how much of what they can promote on air they are allowed to promote on air, right? And if there is any kind of let's say they break that rule, let's say they cross that line on air, you will cut them off and you will switch their mic off if that's the case. And excuse me, right? Let me just quickly get myself a glass of water. Just give me a second here. Excuse that little bit of a break. I know that you've just gone from one point of recording to the other. I just had to get some water. Okay, all right. So where was I? Yes, about the whole contribution about like free publicity or advertising, etc., and how you should cut off a someone that is like just unashamedly promoting themselves without any permission from the station itself, right? So with community, let's look at community in particular. You do want to you are there to service the community. We have a completely different mandate to let's say commercial radio, and the community radio station will have an obligation to promote things that are, let's say, NPOs or NGOs, whatever it may be, right? And let's say they are trying to raise stuff for the community, or they are raising, they're fundraising for whatever reason, and you are interviewing them for that particular need, then that's okay. That's okay. And again, once again, if you are unsure, please pass that through your program manager, your station manager, to just make sure, right? Again, so just with the interview and the type of person that you want to have on air, make sure that they have a purpose and a reason to why they actually are there. Don't just randomly choose someone for the sake of talking to them. And then you should be good to go for your first step of, let's say, putting on or executing the correct or a great interview. XFM's primary target market is 16 to 24. So XFM is a station in the UK. LSM 7 to 10. So if we look at the old version, so not our SEMs, right? So the LSM is about, let's say, how much people earn. So 7 to 10, disposable income. If you are a 24-year-old, you are earning money. 16-year-old, 10 to 1, you are given money as well, not from parents or whatever it may be, right? Urban South Africans Oh, okay. So now this is a made up station. Sorry, this is not actually referring to XFM. So this is, let's say, now a made up station, XFM. So urban South Africans who are trendy, progressive, and aspirational, which means that they are the following. So, or they will want to listen to the following. All of the interviews and topics should reflect a strategic objective. So something that is relevant to this now LSM. 7 to 10, probably an SEM, or probably the same, about 6 to 8 or so, right? So the SEM, remember through our conversations in before or previous lessons, the SEM is about how much people spend, while the LSM is what people actually earn, okay, what they have given to them as money, right? So, with regard to social responsibility, there should be across the board topics with a slant towards the portfolios of HIV/AIDS and children's yeah, children's mandates. Um, Interviews are related to entertainment, music, sport, current affairs, must and then they must strictly reflect the interest of this actual target market. So, for example, want to be able to interview musicians that these like young listeners are listening to. We want to be able to talk about events that they are able to afford and they can go to and they do want to go and enjoy. We are speaking about current affairs or speaking to people that are, let's say, publicly involved in areas of current affairs that are relevant or that have an effect on the 16 to 24-year-old population of our target market, right? So I think you get an idea. So once again, let's consider and let's continue with this fabricated listener called Joe. Like, who is Joe? So remember, we've got to consider our composite listener, our ultimate listener, before we try and go and see what type of interview slash interviewees are we going to get to chat to. Okay, so meet Joe. Joe is a young, energetic, and passionate human being about South Africa. Now, passionate about South Africa and the world in which he lives. So Joe could have been a man or woman, doesn't matter. Yeah, right. Joe is a huge fan of the world of popular music entertainment, and he is media and tech savvy and always on trend, right? So Joe understands his responsibilities as a young South African and global citizen. So he lives boldly and with these responsibilities. In other words, he is passionate about relationships, sex, friends, family, school, work, and ultimately play. Joe knows what he wants and knows what he wants to what he wants and what he needs to create his own future. Right. So Joe loves XFM, so loyal listener, because XFM is a tribe, it's a group of people who talk to him, with him, and about him. Joe uses XFM to be the first of his friends to be in the know of the latest relevant news and trends. That is the who's who and the what with the XFM. Joe is encouraged to live boldly and to amplify lives. Okay, so that's a nice little roundup of this composite listener. What type of, so before we even continue, what type of like suggestions could we possibly think of? Take a minute for yourself and think, okay, well, what type of interviews would would I want to run on the station or in a show that Joe would be interested in? So, for example, we could have, in terms of tech savvy, if there's new technology, let's say from by the iPhone, that's kind of like breaking the internet and it's breaking people's pockets, but they're loving it. Or there's a PS6 or whatever it is. We want to get the people from PlayStation, or we want to get whatever it is to make sure that we can maybe give away some new PlayStations, but also talk about the new PlayStation 6. There isn't no PlayStation 6, but you know that it's coming and it's going to cost us an arm and a leg. But I definitely know that Joe is going to be definitely interested to want to be one of those consumers, right? We could also speak about definitely maybe the positive contributive effects to your current motor skills and let's say your development, where today's our brains are fraught and they're fried and whatever it is, we're not getting a lot of actual motor skills stimulation, and perhaps how the new PS6 and new gaming, consoles have decided to focus on particularly building, strengthening certain base motor skills, and could bring in someone that is, an expert professional on the, let's say, the mental structure. So not exactly a psychologist, whatever it is, but someone that understands the brain or whatever it is, and can make commentary on that. Take that as a good interview. and so on and so forth. You can carry on in that way. If we look at it, say, friends and family, we can chat about, again, I want to try and make these all interviews. So maybe there's a new friends, making new friends app, and it's gone beyond, let's say, social media, quote unquote, and become a little bit of a platform where it's really effective. It's maybe the most effective app that's come about in the past 10 years on making real friends, and how maybe it's like revolutionized the way that we have virtual culture, cultivated into something that's healthy as opposed to something that's unhealthy. Right. And you would definitely want to speak to, let's say, the developer of that, or let's say, people that are, maybe the first person that used it, if you can find them. Or you want to speak to, let's say, a friend circle that have now met in person, and cultivated, let's say, a great relationship or a friendship circle based on this app, whatever it may be, right? Okay, so every good radio station should compose a composite listener to help presenters show them what they need to talk about. So the famous talk show host Larry King said that the best interviews are conversational. Well, so not only did Larry say that, but we all know that for a fact. But Larry is a definitely good example. He's a definitely good example of how to be a great. Well, he's literally one of our most, or he has been, or was, because he has passed away. Like, was one of our, and will still remain to be one of our most iconic, investigative journalists, to ever grace like our on air waves, right, on television, obviously predominantly, but he was on radio for a really long time as well. Sidebar hashtag, you should really go listen to his biography audiobook. It's one of my favorites, and explains how he entered radio and went on air. So great. He speaks about the art of conversation as well there. Your questions should come from your guests' stories and not from your notes alone, right? So you therefore need to be an active listener while you're conducting this particular interview. XFM, for example, shows do many interviews on air many times. These interviews are not properly researched, produced, and executed, and are usually very boring for the listener. So, how do we fix that type of thing? So, for example, they're not properly researched. Well, go ahead and go and do some research, as you should, because it's your job and you're going to prep, right? When you produce it, the process of, let's say, culling the fat there and getting some of the best content, I'm saying, in terms of research, as well as, let's say, maybe you pre-recording the interview, etc., or you are, let's say, prepping this particular interviewee, pre-prepping, I'm saying, so you're getting a feel for them before you actually go to the show. And I'm not saying this is on the same day. I'm saying while you're prepping the show and getting the right guest to come on and speak to you, that's part of the production process. And then obviously the way that you execute it, like we said in the previous way, when you are lining up that guest, um, via telephonically, or if it's just an interview or whatever it is, right? That's a face to face. Like that has to be obviously well executed. If you are passionate, you are present, you're locked in, and you're ready to go, right? So you'll be able to answer and ask the right questions and responses from this guest. Usually, it's a case of guest A is available and they have many followers on Twitter. So why not just get them in? That means nothing, right? So it doesn't, like, to say, oh, you've got like 5,000 followers on Twitter. I mean, they're so boring right now. No one's really impressed anymore because there are people with 50 million followers. And so what? So what? Do they have something to actually say, right? Then we do a Google search about guest A and get some what we believe to be good questions in which our listeners will be interested. Then guest A comes in and we ask them these questions. This at best leads to a very mediocre interview at the end of the day. If you just follow these base instructions, base steps, or base progress steps, right? You've got to obviously sink yourself into the show itself, and be, again, always do a litmus test of saying, like, would I find this interview to be interesting? So for example, like this week I want to, everyone knows, I'm going to speak about entrepreneurship on the show. Now everyone's like yawning, oh, so boring, we spoke about this so many times before, like we've been hearing about this since we were in grade one, blah blah blah. It's just obviously not relevant, in the sense that, well, it's just not useful. Okay, so what I've decided to do with this particular chat, with an expert professional this week is that I want to try to debunk all the current mythologies around, right? The myths around entrepreneurship. So how successful you can be as a small business owner, and where you can go get that influx of income and revenue and all these type of things that are promised to you, but you just actually don't know how to do it, or why it's being done, or why it's not working, etc., why your business is actually not working. So I'm gonna bring in this expert professional and speak about what people are currently struggling with, right? In terms of running a small business, trying to keep it afloat. Obviously, we know that businesses have been closing down, etc. Again, I've used etc. so many times. I'll try not to use it again, but you do understand that it looks like a good answer to 35 odd percent of unemployed people, and I say active unemployed people that are able to go and work, they are of legal age, etc. Oh, there I go again, right? And this is not, it's not like you're not helping me by saying, oh, start your own business. There's I need stock, I need to pick the right product, I need to pick the right service. Like, there are a lot of downfalls and pitfalls that people make mistakes on. That again, people say, "I'll just do this," and then and don't give you all the in betweens and the whys and why nots of why things are happening. So let's say you have a business that's been doing really well. I want to ask this guest, like, why all of a Sunday will this business not be doing well? What are some of the main things that I should be looking at as red flags before I go down under um, with my all my efforts and my years of work that I've put in. Okay, we should want to be excellent, not mediocre. We always strive for excellence. So you what is it? What is it? You aim for the stars and you get the moon or whatever it is. I don't know, right? The moon is great, right? So if you get the moon is great, but aim bigger and higher and stronger, so that you know that your attempt when you do go on air is a good attempt. It's a great attempt, right? Our competition is not only other stations, but everything that you now see around you in terms of YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, especially, right? So you must look at the way that we do things on radio needs a lot of attention, needs a lot of I say physical ability from our that we expect from our listeners, because it is an audio platform, an audible platform, and we do ask a lot from them to stay tuned, right? Whereas that instant kind of gratification and processing that we do find on social media is a lot more titillating, right? I want to say tantalizing. Is that a word? Yeah, tantalizing. Yeah. Right. Okay. Tantalizing. It's evoke. It's provocative, and we'd rather want to, in other words, go that point or that route to go and find our entertainment like high, right? As opposed to sit and risk it by listening to radio, quote unquote, right? So there is a six-phase approach to interviewing an interview preparation that is guaranteed to lead to excellence. The magic comes from phase 1 to 4. And then when you get that right, you have to follow through, right? So let's go and look at some of these or all of these phases. One is the quality test. So be selective of the guests that the show books. In order to get the best results, ask the following 4 questions, right? Are they a big star with a company like Universal Studios or a high target appeal? Can they tell great stories? It gets kind of straightforward. When it's not straightforward, obviously, I'm going to break it down. Does one of the show players have a high interest in the guests? So, will this be something that can create great entertainment, in other words? So, don't always just look for the names, right? But maybe they're a big name in what they are doing, and people don't even know about them, and people don't even know what they're doing. But it is definitely something that people use or are exposed to, or need to be exposed to in their everyday life. Are they a great interview? So, even if they're not a huge name, are they a great, like a person that has great conversation skills and has a lot to add to your program? Will they set up one of the players on the show in some or other way? Okay. So again, just players, contributors, and everyone that is obviously affected. So listeners, it could be obviously stakeholders, any type of stakeholder, right? So phase 2, pre-production. So spend at least 60 minutes longer preparing at the interview than the actual length of the interview. So again, by researching biographies, get up to date on the person's career, like movies. If they featured in movies, did they just get snubbed for a role in like a big local production, whatever it may be. Did they just win a SAMA? Did they, whatever it is, what was their response? Go get that kind of audio, that soundbite from YouTube or from the net in some other way. Go and freshen up your knowledge so that you're on the same page as they are, even maybe knowing a little bit more than what they do in terms of what the world has exposed to the public around them, right? So then develop the first set of questions. Develop a story arc that is a reason for having the guest, as I say, in which you create a touch point. So once again, so we have this person, particularly because in the news it's X, Y, and Z. You see, and then he said, etc. Didn't do it. X, Y, and Z is happening. And so this person is definitely someone that we want to actually listen to. And this is the reason why the listener will want to listen to them too. Right. So I'm saying, so you'll give the listener a reason when you go on air and you contextualize and introduce this particular guest, right? So this could be a fun element that no other interviewer would do. For example, a fun activity such as a game, whatever it is, if you want to get to know them better, which is kind of obviously overdone, but it's one of those types of things where you maybe might want to get like their favorite human being on the on this earth, which is their grandmother or their uncle or their cousin or whatever it is, to reveal some things that no one else would know. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so phase three: conduct a pre-interview interview. Very important to gauge as to the quality of this guest, but not only that, we want to be able to see and want to cull the fat like we do with a caller. We want to be able to see what we want to speak a lot to this person and get to know them off air so that we have a lot of ammunition that is, and also perspective on their person and their life and their context of why they're going to be on the show. Right. So this is a foreign concept for the South African radio industry. However, it is common practice in American television, right? When you say it's a foreign concept, the producers are either they're not skilled enough or they're lazy and they don't do it. They just expect the presenter to, let's say, go on there with the guest and just make magic happen. They're just going to prep them with a couple of answers or questions, should I say, a bit of a background, and they don't actually put in that second kind of layer. Um, to possibly what could be a much more interesting and much more captivating interview itself. Okay, so the pre-interview can be done by the producer or the actual interviewer, and should be done about, let's say, 24 hours, at least 24 hours before. Normally you would do it a lot earlier, just depending on when it is that you want to place that guest, depending if you're doing a weekday show, if you're doing a weekend show. You want to try and get them and you want to get them committed like before, so that you can stop looking and actually start doing more research and, let's say, adding a lot more color to your show as you get ready for that particular day, whatever it may be, right? Ask the guests about how they feel about the story arc, see what their opinion is, see if they've got anything of value to say in certain areas, see if they're interested in doing something fun and interesting. So, for example, um, let's say I'll do, true or false, or whatever it is, with, let's say, entrepreneurship, etiquette. I don't know, whatever it is, right? And that's pretty cool. So we can add that as a different dimension when we go out on air and put this particular a guest on. Okay, keep notes of what questions have been potential or have the potential for great answer stories, and which questions receive mediocre answers. So gauge the interest in the story arc, game, or fun, or element, or develop element of what you want to do. Let's go to phase four. Lane continues to say that the presenter should not or should now go back to the drawing board after the pre-interview interview and redeveloped game plan. Make sure that you go back and you go and revise now the initial questions that you did come up with, and revise them with more obviously relevant, more the better, the richer, the golder ones that you now have come up with after you have chatted to this particular person. Plan the open-ended questions that you are going to ask. Definitely open-ended means that it's not a yes or no question. It's not a do you rate this 1 to 5. It's an open-ended question. What do you think? How do you do this, or whatever it is, right? Allow them to open up their conversation and their perspective on that. Phase 5, welcome the guests. So this is now when we're on the day they come, they arrive. You're going to go outside. You're going to welcome them professionally. You're going to offer them some water or tea or coffee. If it's 10 to 1 VIP, there's going to be food. The station manager might be there to come welcome them. They're going to be given a bit of a treatment. So even if they're not VIP, you should give them the little base treatment, the basic package, right? And still have that gratitude for them coming in and doing what they need to do. Okay. So that is phase 5. Phase 6 is go out ahead and execute all your hard work, pre-prepping, pre-prepping, and then going to go execute, entertain first and sell second. So take a page from the late night talk shows that we watch on TV. So obviously the American talk shows are the biggest. I'm saying late night talk shows in the country. I mean in the world. With second, obviously the UK stations. So we have our Piers Morgans, etc. But go look at how they run interviews. So it's late night for a reason because their conversations are taboo. They are a lot more open and they are definitely for an adult audience, say. But discuss what your guest is promoting during the last part of the interview. That's what I said to you with a musician. Mention it as a by the way thing. Oh, but you can also go and just check out their brand new album, blah blah blah, and that's it. For example, right? Make it clear to publicists, handlers, and so on that the show will promote the guest's project, and that's the goal. Of it to be entertaining and fun conversation. So this will benefit the guests regarding of how famous they are, and then surprise your guests. So not everything that you prep on that sheet is what you're going to say on air because it depends on how they answer your questions, how much fun you're having, and how much synergy you do have with your guests. And avoid questions that already provide like an answer. In other words, things that people already know, right? Please, by all means. So with the phase 6 and execute, let's continue. Avoid yes or no questions. Ask open-ended questions. I think that's quite self-explanatory. Ask sensitive questions deeper in the interview. So once your guest becomes comfortable and they trust you, they are ready to, just like a caller when you go and you have a conversation with them and discuss this before. Like you will slowly like you will, let's say, bait a fish, whatever it is, or you'll cook a frog. As you'll slowly turn up the temperature and you'll get in there and they'll be very happy to delve into more sensitive things when they gain your trust, when you gain their trust. Etc. Right, there we go. Last time I'll use that. Use question clusters. So these can be effective device, be an effective device to help you delve deeper into someone's personality. A series of questions on one topic. So let's say we have this maybe I've done some research and I've seen that the statistics on entrepreneurship and it's a new business is now the interest is completely bombed. It's gone from, let's say, like we had 75% a positive, I don't know, proactive um company creation, in 2017 to now in 2023, we're looking at, let's say, like 17%. Why did this happen? But also, what is it that, business or small business owners or people in general have said this is a safer bet rather than taking the risk and starting my own business? So that's like a cluster question, right? Um, okay, all right. So just before we end the lesson, often guests are not available for pre-interview interviews, but you will force that, right? I've had a guest just recently who wanted to dictate to me what I should say on my show and what questions because they just weren't available. I said to them, I've Saturday 10 o'clock. I can chat to you and we can have a conversation. They were like, oh no, I'm not available then. And I said I can't do the interview with you. Finished and done. So don't let them dictate to you. Never mind what the slide says here. Like, unless it is dictated to you by the station and you have to get it on air, do what you need to do and do your best to get the interview and pre-interview and pre-interview done, because it's going to make you sound better, guarantee your show to sound better at the end of the day. Otherwise, stop, drop, and roll that guest out. You can always replace them or not do the interview at all. There's a class exercise for you. So, what in your knowledge makes a good interview versus a bad interview? And make that clearly different, right, to you. So write that down. List at least five differences and explain why, using them to support rules of great broadcasting either being met or broken, right? So list the steps on executing an interview from pre-planning on execution to post-mortem activities. What is post-mortem? What do we do after, like we've run the interview? So you've got to pre-plan for the post-plan as well. Um, are you? Let me just keep quiet. I'll just give. I'll give you one example. Are you going to do a podcast, an extended podcast on that afterwards? You got to pre-prep and know that. Let's say your pre-prep needs to involve, let's say, confirmation. It's got to involve, I don't know, maybe a venue. I don't know what you're going to do, right? Okay, let me just not give you the answers, right? How do you select on doing an interview? List reasons that support the justification of the interview on air. Think about factors like context, relevance, format, listeners' buy-in, and the right time for it to go on air. I know that you're going to do well, and good luck with the exercise. I will see you in the next lesson.